Peter Klein's wardrobe for the Standard is provided by Samtani & Son Tailors in Langley. Men's and women's tailoring. Samtani & Son. Fitted for you, fitted right.
I'm back with Peter Ash. He's the co-founder of Under the Same Sun, a charity working in East Africa trying to end the persecution and marginalization of albinos. Now, when you were growing up as an albino in Canada, did you understand what was going on? Did you wonder why you were born this way?
I did, because I had the good fortune of having an older brother. There's three in our family. My brother Paul, the oldest child, the firstborn, had albinism. When he was born in the hospital in Montreal that he was born in, he was literally the first person with albinism that had ever been born in that hospital. But the doctors or nurses there remembered.
Wow.
And so when he was born, they actually did not know he had albinism. They just thought he was a fair-haired child. My mom brought him home, and after a couple of months, she discovered he wasn't seeing properly, because people with albinism have a visual impairment, as I do. And so they began to become concerned. As they took him to some eye specialists, a couple of them didn't know that he had anything wrong either. They couldn't explain it. Finally, they found a doctor who actually knew he had albinism. And so then my brother David was born as the second born. He was not affected by albinism. His pigmentation was normal, eyesight was normal. So they thought, okay, we're done having children with albinism. I'm born, I have albinism, which is odd. Usually it doesn't skip a child like that. Often you'll have just one child or maybe two back to back. So they were rather surprised, but not shocked when I came along, because, well, in fact, interestingly enough, when I was born, the doctor said, oh, you have a fair-haired child. My mother said, no, it isn't. He has albinism. She knew right away. So yes, I mean, I, in my case, was fortunate. I had an older brother who had the condition, so my parents understood it. He understood it. So I didn't go through that confusion. I went through misunderstanding and discrimination as a child and as a teenager. But I had tremendous support at home from my parents, from my brothers, from my family. So for me, I was able to weather the storm quite effectively. My parents believed in me and stood by me.
Now, you ended up becoming a Baptist minister.
Yes, that was my first career.
Was that guided at all by feeling that there was some sort of spiritual reason that you were born this way, or God somehow made you this way?
I can't say directly, but I'm sure one's life story feeds into everything. And my story had a number of curveballs in it.
I mean, did you feel like God had anything to do with you being born?
I think so. The Bible says in Psalm 139, I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. The Bible says that God made us the way we are, and I wasn't made by accident this way. So somehow, for reasons I still don't understand, God allowed this to occur in my life. And when I look at what's going on in Africa right now, what I'm doing with Under the Same Sun, maybe it was for a day such as this, that maybe because I had the motivation and means to make a difference in Tanzania, that God allowed me to be born. Who knows? Right. But I do believe that one of the things that did help me was this notion of being unique or special. I remember being teased once when I was in school, where kids would call me names. And I remember one time the teacher forced me to play baseball. I said, look, I can't see the ball coming at me. I'll miss. And the teacher was not helpful, quite ignorant actually, and forced me to play baseball. The softball hit me in the face, broke my expensive glasses. My parents didn't have much money. My kids called me names. I felt embarrassed. I came home crying. And I said, Mom, I'm a freak. I'm weird. There's nobody in my school who looks like me. And she says, yeah, Peter, that means you're unique. You're special. God made you the way you are. You're not a freak and you're not weird. And so I was comfortable from an early age that I was different. And people looked at me on the street. And people made comments, and you're right. Maybe I had the sense that God could call me for something special. Maybe it was more salient to me, perhaps.
So you went from being a Baptist minister to then being a businessman,
yes,
a successful businessman.
Yeah.
And so how do you end up in, essentially as a human rights activist in East Africa?
Well, it's funny. I've often said to friends and colleagues that I believe the two careers in my life prepared me for the third. The first decade of my life was in the ministry. I had gone on to my theology degree and my master's degree in counseling psychology, then into the ministry. And then the next career, as you said, was 12 years in business. And so I've got these kind of two bookends, this 10 years in ministry and this 12 years in business. And I said, a couple of years back, I was sitting saying, what's next in my life? I'd been successful, and I wondered what the next chapter was going to be. And I thought, whatever the next chapter is, it's going to marry the heart I gained in ministry for people and the love I have for people with the business savvy and the communication skills and thinking skills that I gained in business. And lo and behold, that this work with Under the Same Sun has done just that, because we're dealing with political matters, we're dealing with human rights issues, we're dealing with media issues. So, I believe there's been this mix of my life story to prepare me for this opportunity.
Well, in East Africa, in Tanzania, you've worked with the president himself.
The Prime Minister, yeah.
With the Prime Minister, excuse me. I mean, publicly, he's come out and supported what you're doing.
Yeah, 3 times we've met Prime Minister Pinda, and we met recently actually with the Chief Justice of Tanzania as well as most of the cabinet ministers. So we've had the opportunity to discuss our concerns with them. And frankly, one has to wonder if the doors opening to those halls of power in Tanzania was to some degree influenced by the media pressure.
Right.
Because Tanzania receives a lot of foreign aid and also is highly dependent on tourism from the West. And so there's a sensitivity toward when the West feels ill of them to perhaps make their calendar open when I request a meeting with the Prime Minister.
But just because you've met with the Prime Minister doesn't necessarily mean that things are going to change on the ground. Because my understanding is that some police have actually even been involved in the trafficking of body parts.
I mean, excuse me for saying this, but politicians are kind of universal around the world, right? What they say and what they do are often very different things. And so I believe the politicians in Tanzania, particularly the Prime Minister, who I'm most familiar with, is sincere in his efforts. He's actually brought in 3 children to his own home who have albinism, as foster children, which tells me that he's to some degree a man of his word. What the problem is, he's facing powers bigger than him. As you rightly point out, there's issues of police corruption and police involvement. There's 4 police officers that were arrested for participation in this crime, 3 of whom were released shortly thereafter. There's been even allegations that members of the judiciary may have been involved. So, these are allegations that surfaced in the local press. These are not allegations we made. These were ones that local media observed. So, we know police corruption and inefficiency are issues in developing countries for a variety of reasons, often lack of resources, lack of training. And also, remember, these are the same people who believe in witchcraft. The belief in witchcraft is prevalent across society. So do you think it's possible that some of those police officers also believe in witchcraft? Absolutely.
And there have been, what,
57 killings.
And how many trials?
There have been 8 trials begun, only 2 have completed, and none are going on now. So of the 57 killings, only 2 cases have led to a complete conviction.
Well, we have to take another quick break, but when we come back, I want to hear what your experience has been as an albino in this country where they want to kill albinos. You've been there
5 times.
5 times. So more with Peter Ash after this short break.